Good morning, everyone. Ich sag's nochmal auf Deutsch. Willkommen zum 5. MediaTech Talk des MediaTech Hub Potsdam. Und weil wir heute einen Gast aus London haben, gehe ich sofort ins Englische. Welcome to the 5th MediaTech Talk. We are very happy that you are joining us out there at the screens. MediaTech Talk is a small format delivered by MediaTech Hub Potsdam to you. MediaTech Hub Potsdam, who doesn't know that, is one of 12 digital hubs selected by the German government and the only one in Germany dealing with the digital transformation on media technologies. Right from Babelsberg, where we are located, the oldest and still one of the largest film studios in the world, we are bringing MediaTech Talk to you and focus on video and audio-based future technologies. Not only changing film and TV, but mobility, logistics, health, and much more. We try to intertwine perspectives, breaking walls, and discussing the new world of media tech that is entering almost every sector in life. We'd like to thank very much the Economic Development Agency Brandenburg for supporting MediaTech Talk over the whole year to 2020, which is really outstanding. Thank you so much. And as we were addressing in the past editions of MediaTech Talk, the power of media tech in mobility, health, and logistics, we decided to take today a very deep look into the core industry of media tech and its current challenges. Broadcast, or is it still broadcast? Is it IT? Is it OTT? What is it? We will talk today about the vision of Broadcast 2021, how to design tomorrow. This is the title, and this is what we can discuss today. And I am extremely happy that Mark Harrison is with us from London, live from London, and that he immediately said yes, as I was asking him to do this discussion. Mark, hi to London, and thank you very much for joining us.
No, it's a real pleasure, Peter. Always a delight to work with you.
Thank you so much. Let me introduce first a bit the DPP, and Mark, maybe you add later on something, because our German audience may not know DPP that well. And the picture I always give when I talk about DPP is to the German audience. Imagine that there is the Producers Guild, the German Producers Guild, the German Suppliers Guild, and the unfortunately now closed Institute for Broadcasting Technology in Germany in just one organization. Very smart, very agile, very powerful. And I think this is the DPP working globally now and having more than 400 members from Apple, BBC, to Google, to HBO, and also to ZDF, to make it from A to Z. All those who are working in the complete supply chain for content. Mark Harrison himself is the managing director of the DPP, which is based in London. Before, he was working in various positions at the BBC for about, I think, 13 years, most of the time leading teams of innovation and future tech groups. Mark was building up, or is building up, the DPP since 2014, and it is now one of the most successful media networks globally. And Mark, again, thank you very much for being with us. My name is Peter Effenberg. I'm CEO of MediaTech Hub Potsdam, and I'm happy to moderate the next 45 minutes. MediaTech Talk is live broadcasted at YouTube, on YouTube and Facebook. You can please ask any questions in the chats in YouTube and Facebook. We will see it directly here, and we can bring your question into the discussion. And when we are done, you can rewatch MediaTech directly after we are closing at the YouTube channel of MediaTech Hub Potsdam. Mark, just 3 weeks ago, the DPP was organizing the annual Tech Leaders Briefing, in which I think more than 30 CTOs of broadcasters from all over the world shared their vision on the future. You will give us today an insight into that discussion, the key facts, and I think you prepared something for us. And I would just handle over the stage for you. And thank you again so much that you're with us.
Thanks, Peter. That's a pleasure. Yes, hi everybody. I'm Mark Harrison. I head up the DPP, which we describe as being the media industry's business network. And as Peter said, we specialize in bringing companies from right across the whole media supply chain together to discuss and identify problems and common challenges and trends, and sometimes to make interventions to try and improve things. But each year we have a major conference, which normally, of course, takes place in person, but this year had to take place virtually, like everything else. And at this conference, what we do is we, as Peter said, we bring together 30 very senior leaders from 30 media companies. And the intention is to get these people who are all responsible for the strategy of their organization around the way that content is made and managed and delivered to audiences. So if you like, it's the kind of the technical and operational side of the media business. And we ask these leaders to share with us what is going to be important for them in the year ahead. But we do it in a very particular format, which I will come to in one moment. So if we could just see the presentation, I'm going to have a chat about what we learned from this year for the next kind of 20 minutes or so. So we held this year's briefing from a virtual studio in London, and we brought in our 30 speakers over Zoom into the session. If you just go to the next slide, I'll just give you a sense of the companies that were taking part this year. As you can see, it's a really diverse group. We've got some very famous historic broadcasters there, like Warner Media and the BBC and Viacom CBS, but also people like Facebook and BuzzFeed and Vice Media, and then companies from the European continent. We have ZDF, we have SVT, we have RTL. So a huge mix, and some of these companies specializing in live content, like sport, others doing a huge amount of OTT and so forth. Now, as I said, each of these executives is given a very, very particular brief by us. They are told, you will present on your own for 15 minutes. So we don't have any panel sessions. Each speaker speaks individually for 15 minutes, not a minute more. They cannot use slides, they cannot use PowerPoint, but in their 15 minutes, they must identify 3 key themes or messages that they want the industry audience to hear. Not 2, not 4, but 3. And we do this for a particular reason, because what it means is that if, for instance, we have 30 speakers and each person addresses 3 themes, we end up with 90 key messages. And what we're then able to do is to take those and sort of classify them into higher level themes. And from that, we can start to see trends emerging in what it is that people are talking about. And part of the appeal of the Tech Leaders Briefing for the audience, and indeed for the other speakers, is that they get to watch trends kind of emerge in front of their very eyes. This is a conference in which repetition is actually a good thing. So let's just remind ourselves of what people talked about in the previous year, in 2019. So if we go to the next slide. When we took the key messages that people gave to us in 2019, and we classified them into kind of higher level categories, this is what came out. We had 32 speakers, 3 messages each, so that was 96 themes. And what you can see is that in 2019, there was a huge emphasis upon cloud supply chains. Now, if you're not familiar with this term, what that means is turning all the processes that go from the moment that a piece of finished media content is received by a broadcaster or a content platform, through all the ways in which that content is processed and managed and stored and turned into different versions and so forth, right through to the moment it is sent out to the consumer. All those processes are increasingly now being managed by technical services operated in the cloud. And this is often referred to as a cloud-led media supply chain. So it's that part of the content creation workflow. So lots of speakers were saying how important this was to them and to their company. They either had adopted or they were moving towards cloud-led supply chains. Automation is very important in this process. So there's a lot of discussion of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And as you might expect, also a lot of discussion about different ways, particularly using IP now, in which that content was distributed to audiences. Perhaps the kind of standout, perhaps surprising, at least strong theme last year was environmental sustainability, which actually occupied 7 of the kind of key messages of the speakers in last year's conference. Okay, so that was 2019. So what happened after 2020? What was it this year that people were emphasizing? So if we go to the next slide, we will show you it by comparison. This year was strikingly different in the space of just 12 months. So those lines in blue represent the themes that were raised by our speakers this year. And what you can see is a huge emphasis upon remote working and remote production, a huge emphasis upon workforce transformation, and a huge emphasis upon business transformation. I'll be talking in a bit more detail about what we mean by all those themes in a moment. But what's really interesting about this is that in some respects, you might say, well, of course, this is just a year of pandemic played back to us. Workforces have been working remotely. It's been a very, traumatic and different experience for the workforce. And of course, as we've all been hearing, the sort of huge upturn in the consumption of streamed content, on-demand video during the pandemic has led companies to think even more about how they're going to pivot their businesses more strongly in that direction. So in some respects, you might say what we were seeing this year was completely unsurprising. However, when you start to get into the way in which people talked about these themes, there are some nuances and a degree of urgency that I think is distinctive and important and complex. And we'll come to that in a moment. I just want to show you one more kind of data-led slide, which is this one. If we look at just the most discussed themes, and now we do it in terms of the percentage of speakers, the total percentage of our speakers that raised a particular theme, it gives you another view on this that I think really emphasizes what took place this year. So you can see that half of all our speakers talked about moving their companies towards remote working and remote production on a permanent basis. 40% of them talked about business transformation. 40% of them talked about workforce transformation. So addressed by very, very high proportions of our speakers. Okay, I'm now just going to spend a few minutes just taking you through the way that we have interpreted all these messages. We looked in detail at these 30, 15-minute presentations, and not just the headline theme that people addressed, but also some of the underlying themes that were clearly priorities to them. And when we did that, we felt there were 6 really strong messages coming through this year. And I'm just going to spend a minute or two on each of those. Okay, and here is the first one. If we go to the next slide. The first of those key messages was this. 2020 was a change catalyst year. Of course, you will say, of course it was. We have all heard companies saying, we achieved more change this year in the space of a few days, particularly in March and April, when everybody was sent home. We achieved more change then than we had in several years previously, of course. However, these people that we're talking at this conference are actually the people who've been attempting to drive this kind of change for many years. And so there was an important emphasis here for them, which was this. They did not regard 2020 as the year in which they changed their businesses and their ways of operating. They regarded it as the year in which their businesses overall came to accept the changes that they had been putting in place in recent years. As some people have observed, we all had the capability to work remotely, just that we were doing it in our offices, because plenty of businesses actually had cloud-based working tools. They just weren't using them in the manner for which they were designed. There was even a sense of frustration and irritation among some of our speakers. One of our CTOs said, okay, after this, can we please stop the bullshit? That was the term he used, and just get on with accepting that we can change quickly if we really want to. So that brings us to the second key message. Cloud. The case is closed. No more debates, please, about whether or not businesses should move to the cloud. No more of those boring panel sessions at media industry conferences about whether or not the cloud is a good thing. Every single one of these companies see the cloud as foundational to how they do business, and they are all using it. It might be public, it might be private, it might be a mix of the two. They might still have some on-premise storage. But the key thing is that they regard the use of cloud as a philosophy around being by consuming technology as a service, paying for it on that basis, taking a modular approach to how they create the solutions they need to do what they want to do. And of course, ensuring that their business is scalable both up and down. So all these companies are simply now doing this. Let's go to the third, I guess, if you like, the third of our messages that conveyed a sense of frustration from these very senior leaders. I found this very interesting because it was expressed in a number of different ways and across a number of different themes. But what they all had in common was this. It really is time to stop viewing the media industry through the lens of broadcast television. It's amazing, just culturally as well as technically, the extent to which actually many people in many companies still do this. What I mean by this is that sort of broadcast television can be characterized by being, of course, one-to-many. So you create something and you send it out in essentially the same way to everyone, possibly even only once. It's highly crafted. Everybody gets it in pretty much the same quality because of that mode of distribution. And it's sent when we, the creator, are ready to send it. So it's very kind of a supply-led model. It has its own craft, its own distinctive technology. It has its own very distinctive technical standards. What a lot of our speakers were saying was this. We have to now adopt an internet mindset, an IP, internet protocol mindset, a consumer mindset in which we are distributing content from one-to-one, highly personalized, over the internet increasingly. And actually in qualities that will range from the very best, because this is how people are by and large consuming, for instance, ultra high definition content, to sometimes very low, where because of problems with connectivity, we're just trying to do our best to get some kind of video signal through. It's a very different way of thinking, and it embraces different tools, And actually, this is a space in which sometimes consumer technologies such as smartphones, cameras, can really have an important role to play. In other words, we exist on a kind of sliding scale the whole time, both in terms of our tools and our technology, about how we are choosing to make and deliver content. Okay, the fourth big theme. So this really comes back to those core messages that I described earlier about the importance of workforce transformation. So yeah, let's take us to the fourth point on our slide. 90% about people. This is a reference to the phrase often used that technology change is actually 90% about people. But guess what? 25 of our 30 speakers, which is getting towards 90%, actually discussed themes relating directly to the workforce. And they were in the following areas. They talked about skills, about ensuring that their people have the right skills to work in this internet age I've just referred to. They talked about the need to break down internal silos and to integrate their companies so that everybody across the business actually understands the business goals and objectives and are focused on consumer-led thinking. There was a huge amount of discussion about diversity and inclusion and the need for companies to have workforces that represent and reflect their audiences. And of course, there was a lot of discussion about the need for people to be able to work wherever they want or need to work physically, whether it's at home or whether it's in the office, to build from this year to have that kind of adaptability. It's been a year of reflection, 2020, about the workforce, and it's something that perhaps Peter and I can discuss a bit further later on. That I think this is a very good thing. It's really made everybody focus on the individual characteristics of their workforce, but it creates a lot of challenges, because when you're thinking about your workforce on a one-to-one basis, just like your audience, how do you put in place corporate ways of doing things which actually exist, because that's a way of driving efficiency? Really interesting. So the fifth theme. The fifth theme was about business transformation, and that in many respects brings together all these messages I've already discussed. What these leaders are saying is, we now simply have to build media companies that see no difference in what type of content we're making, what genre it is, what duration it is, whether it goes out on linear television, whether it goes out OTT, whether it's to be consumed on a large display, to be consumed on a mobile phone. It doesn't matter. It's all content. And we must be able to manage all of that within a single technical and operational system. We cannot have these pieces siloed any longer, particularly because not only do we have to create such diversity of type of content, but at enormous volumes, just enormous. Consumers expect us to have large inventories of content, but also we now create versions for different consumers, often in different territories, in different languages. You cannot do this if you're going to operate in individual linear television and OTT operations. And of course, we have to be agile, as people did this year, in responding to changes in consumer habits and demands that can happen quite literally overnight. I mean, the increases in consumption of stream content in the third weekend in March of this year, when most people went home, was quite extraordinary, and companies had to respond like that to it. The sixth and final message that we felt came through really strongly was about the relationship between customers and their suppliers. A really strong message here that to suppliers that you can no longer try and sell to us on the basis that it's great, you must buy it. That doesn't work for us. The only thing that works for us is we have a product or a service that we really believe can help you to deliver your business goals more effectively. And we believe that because we know how it will do it, and we are very happy to be measured on whether or not we do achieve that for you. So there's an insistence upon a greater business focus and an understanding of the customer from suppliers. The challenge, however, is how we create, as an industry, sufficiently high quality and focused encounters for customers and suppliers best to understand each other. Because although in some respects people loved not having trade shows to go to, they also missed those kinds of engagements, and they haven't found a new way of doing business. So what I'd say finally about all this, just by way of conclusion, is that there was a really, really strong sense amongst our speakers that 2021 will be the year of doing. It's going to be the year of delivery, often in very constrained businesses, short of money because of the effects of this year, but an absolute determination to drive or to complete business change. So we expect a really turbulent 2021 that will be very uncomfortable in many respects, but I think will leave us in another 12 months' time the equivalent of 3 to 5 years further on than we thought we were going to be in 2019 when we looked ahead a couple of years. There we go. Peter, you must tell me what you think.
Great. I can just do it like this, Mark. Just giving one quote from one of these. Just great insight. Thank you, Mark. That's awesome. I have a couple of questions, but before I want to ask the people again, please use the chance to ask Mark any question directly here in the chat, so we can, as you see, bring that directly into the discussion. The workforce transformation. I would love to go a bit more deep into that, because I mean, Mark, you and I, from the feeling, we are talking about transformation, business transformation, and workforce transformation in the media sector for what, 5 years, 6 years, something like that. And now everyone in 2020 says, "Oh, now it changed."
Yeah.
But what exactly does that mean? I mean, is that the ability that we are all using Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all that kind of stuff, or is that something different? What really changed in the workforce in 2020?
Well, I think there are two things that are really fundamental. One is that the moment that everybody went home and went on to some kind of remote video platform in order to interact with their company and to deliver their work, employers established these sort of one-to-one relationships. It was paramount that they considered the well-being of their staff, and also, of course, as has frequently been said, it was strangely democratizing, because now, whether you are the senior manager or whether you are a relatively junior person in a company, you are all equally just a tile on a Zoom screen or a Teams screen or whatever it might be. And because we were all experiencing what can only be called a trauma, a social and cultural trauma, of course, people were vulnerable and they shared. And that was great, because I think it made workforces see each other as people. Indeed, we literally saw inside people's homes. You know, we saw them being interrupted by their children, and we became much more aware of each other as whole, complete people. And that was great. And I do think that is partly actually why thinking about around diversity and inclusion, I mean, of course, accelerated by some of the events that happened globally this year, Black Lives Matter, the killing of George Floyd and so forth. But, this sort of awareness of each other really accelerated that sense that we have to be more thoughtful about the composition of our workforces. So that's all great. The problem you have as an employer, whether you are small or big, is you get to a point where you have the option now to, if you like, return to normal. What do you do? Is it still okay for everybody to work however they want to work? What happens in a team if you have a team of 10 and 4 of them want to stay working at home and 6 want to be in the office? How are you going to manage that? These are really, really difficult problems. And although the notion that individuals should better work in the best way for them, both technically and locationally, is I've always firmly believed in it, that you wanted to take yourself into the space that and be with the right people to do the right thing at any given time. It's a great idea, but I think we're going to see a lot of companies really struggle with what it takes to make that a reality in a way that seems fair and appropriate and affordable as well for their employees. So that's the first, I think, really big thing. And then the second thing is just every single business now in media has to be customer focused. And I do think that we've been very aware of ourselves as consumers this year, I think, partly because we are, taking everything online. And it's helped us, again, to identify with the people that we are serving with media. Being a company that is absolutely obsessed with customer satisfaction is a very different thing from being a broadcaster. And again, I think although it's easy to identify, making that real is going to be quite a challenge.
I missed 2 buzzwords in all what you presented. 2 buzzwords. We were at our conference, at MediaTech Hub conference, we were focusing on that. One is virtual production.
Yeah.
And the other one is metadata.
Yeah.
Just like, a question which is already 2, is in your point of view, or what the CTOs of your members are saying, is virtual, because I have a feeling it's not really something new, is virtual production a game changer in 2020 with all the LED screens and green screen and all that kind of stuff? Or is that simply, the same box which is now blue instead of red? This is one question. The second question is, I had a really interesting meeting with Annie Chang, which is the vice president of Universal. And she is one of the 10 most influential of those people who have most influence in Hollywood on the technology side. And she said that metadata is still the most underestimated value of the media supply chain.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? These 2 questions.
Yeah, and I mean, data and metadata was mentioned a lot by our speakers. It's still a huge challenge. They could see its centrality. You can't really drive automation, the benefits of AI fully without it. You can't really personalize effectively without it. And the lack of common data platforms is a problem. The lack of common sort of best practice standards around how we use data is still a huge problem. And it's something we do work on in the DPP. And I think it will be the thing that goes on holding us back over the next couple of years from delivering what we know is possible. And on virtual production, actually nobody talked about virtual production. Virtualized in the sense that you can edit remotely because your desktop has been virtualized from the cloud, but virtual production, meaning that you are placing live action into a virtual background, or being enhanced by a virtual background, not at all. We're actually going to do a piece of work in 2021, which will be a maturity assessment of virtual production, because the whole industry was very, very excited about it at the start of 2020. I went to a couple of conferences where it was discussed a lot, and it was clear that the advances in it were amazing. And I know that there's been a lot of inquiries to people like Epic Games, who specialize in the engines that drive virtual production, since the pandemic. My sense, though, is there are still not very many easily affordable use cases for virtual production in reality. So it's still at the moment either operating at the highest end, premium content, where it's another way of doing green screen in very high end productions, and at the margins in lower end. So it's going to be, I do think it's going to be significant, but it's got a way to go yet.
I think it's a beginning, because what the basis of all this are engines, real-time engines. So this is something really new. I mean, it's not about of course, the LED wall is something coming from the event, because the major difference now is that you have an LED wall which is not anymore that you see every huge screen, and then you have a lot of screens, and then you have the lines in between of that, which we know from TV walls in the past. So now it's like, just you can have a huge LED wall, as huge as you want it. And this is what they did in Mandalorian, and this is what they did in Joker. But the basis of all this is as well that, especially when it comes to virtual or VFX shots together with real shots, that it comes to real-time engines, Unreal, and so on, and who are able to do that. So if that becomes cheaper and technology-wise easier, then you can use that not only for huge Hollywood productions with huge budgets, but also for, as we have seen, one of the cases we had, for the small kids channel somewhere in Germany. And that's something new. I think, to be honest, this is something, as we were talking a lot about virtual reality in the past and the media sector, and we all know that augmented reality is it in the industry, but not virtual reality in the media sector.
Yeah.
All the time there was the question if that virtual reality finds the way down to the daily business. It's the same with virtual production in my opinion.
Yeah, it is similar. Although what a lot of people got wrong with VR was they underestimated the extent to which it would become important as a professional tool rather than as a consumer tool. And actually, it has been used very effectively, and used very effectively when combined with the use of game render engines in virtual production. All these things are kind of coming together, and I think it's really exciting. And I've seen some stuff on this, including indeed at your conference, which has just blown my mind. We have a terrible tendency, though, in our industry to want to apply any and every innovation to everything. We suddenly forget, it's weird, we suddenly forget just how rich and diverse the world of content actually is. And so, an innovation can be really important and yet still only apply to a very small percentage in total of all content making. So yeah, of course, costs have to come down hugely. But I think we need to do quite a bit of work as an industry to just clarify and understand what the appropriate use cases are, so that, if you are a head of production or production manager, then you instinctively, or a director, you instinctively know when this is a technology that might be available to you and when it really isn't.
Yeah. Mark, we have some 5 minutes left, and I have one last question to you, which is a question which is very much less technically. I believe that the year 2020 is a game changer also, because of, this is my word of the year, honestly, fake news.
Yeah.
Because in all that what we are building now as a new ecosystem of content, and content is still king, and all the possibilities of technologies we have, all the new distribution channels we have, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, Twitch, whatever, as we do this now, YouTube, and everyone can do his own TV. I have the feeling for a couple of years that while we are using these kinds of technologies, we are lacking a discussion on how we want to do that. And I think this pandemic shows us, this year of a pandemic shows us how you can use these technologies for disorienting the audience, for manipulating the audience in the worst thoughts I could ever have. Is that something we should address more, even when we talk about technology?
Yes, and actually, people, if they were sharp-eyed, might have noticed that that trust was a theme actually addressed by 5 of our speakers in different ways. The need to find ways to authenticate content is an increasing issue in the industry. It's actually, from a technical point of view, it's easier to identify content that is genuine than it is to identify content that is fake, if you see what I mean. So it's quite a lot of focus by quite a lot of broadcasters upon trying to find a way to kind of stamp something as clearly real, genuine, from a respected content maker. But there was also, there was a lot of concern this year and last year, actually, expressed by the fact that in media, we have sort of unleashed the power of the internet, but for ill as well as good. And at the moment, in this battle for consumer attention, it feels to me as if that discussion is still somewhat being swept aside. It's like we haven't got time for it. It's a little bit like environmental sustainability. People know it's really, really important. They'll say it's very important. When it comes to actually doing their business and keeping their shareholders happy, they sort of forget for a moment. And I think that is true around trustworthy content, because this is not an easy area at all. But of course, then also one has to say that because media is so pervasive, it always gets blamed for bigger societal problems, and this wouldn't be such a problem, to my mind, if populations in general had a better capability at understanding evidence, data, and making decisions for themselves about what is genuine and what isn't. So, media can't solve all these things. It's also down to education as well.
Yeah. Mark, thank you so much. I think you proved again that we are in the middle of a huge change. I think we will not be jobless in the next 10 years following this. Is there anything you would like to add to this discussion from your own?
Well, only that I get this sense from so many people that we deal with in the DPP that there's never been a greater need to keep talking to each other when everything is going so fast. Because what happened this year wasn't just that lots of companies managed to leap forward, but also the media market leapt forward itself. So some have emerged, having gone forward, but finding themselves still further behind in the race than they thought they were. So the kind of urgency around change is so great. There is no time really to evolve gradually. Change has to be fast and transformational. And to do that with confidence, we have to benefit from the knowledge and experience that we can all share. So yeah, we've got to do a lot of talking next year.
Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you so much to the audience on the screens. This was the last MediaTech talk in 2020. We hope to do this again in 2021. 2021, of course, in real, but in the same time, and I think this is what we also learned this year, we will never skip that online possibility anymore. So to have audiences which are there in real, and at the same time, you can watch this on your own computer. Thank you very much, Mark. Thank you very much, London. We will now end the broadcast, and we wish you all a happy Christmas. Please stay safe and healthy. And I think, Mark, you have the privilege, not yourself, but Britons have the privilege to start tomorrow the new era of this pandemic by having the first vaccine.
It happened today. The first ones happened today, so it's a historic day. Yeah.
So thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.